we've got, and there goes the recording. So I'm good. I'm glad we got that started. We definitely want people to participate, but if you've got lots of background noise, or if you are phoning in through the phone line on Zoom, then please don't put us on hold, because then that hold music kicks in if your campuses or the places you're calling from have that hold music. So definitely like to keep a smooth run through these. So participation is always welcome. Closed captioning, live transcription is enabled should you need it. And if you've got any questions or comments to add, you can certainly raise your hand virtually, or enter it in the chat, and we have people watching that chat box to respond. Next slide here is, we've got, definitely want to call out to the Project Management Community Group co-chairs and steering committee. It's a group of people that are just awesome to work with, and we are the ones that are helping to establish the programming for these monthly meetings. So definitely shout out to John, Lisa, Jen, Fred, Adam, and see, I did all that out of order. Jennifer Birch as well, and in abstention, we've got Jennifer Smith and Carol, I believe, as well. So today's agenda, 2 items. We're going to talk about the survey results from a survey that we posted for the Project Management Community Group. We're also going to run through professional development certifications, kind of a this is your life type of mode of what's it take to get the project management certification. And we're going to hear from 2 people, Fred and Jen Birch. So I'm going to dive on into this. That should take me to this slide, which is just reminding us that as awesome as a tool as Connect is, we definitely want to leverage those hashtags so that as we build more posts in the discussions in the libraries and the blogs, these hashtags will become invaluable as that's not unvaluable, that's invaluable, incredibly valuable as to help us find information and go back and look. So some hashtags that we always recommend is are all posted there, particularly job opportunities, and of course, the popular ones of governance and agile as well, and training. So there's that. Be sure to register for these meetings, so that gets you the calendar invite to pop on your calendar, and you have all the meeting logistics that you need. And there's a calendar of the meetings coming up through December, and I do want to call your attention to July. We do not have a meeting in July. That's our opportunity to take a break, and then we come back in August. And you'll notice that August, September, November, there are no topics posted. So if you're interested in sharing topic in the world of project management, by all means, reach out to the steering committee. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about that. Many of you are sitting there thinking, I don't have anything to present, but I promise you, as project managers or non-project managers, there are things that you guys have learned that others have not experienced, and it's always a good opportunity to share so that others benefit from your knowledge. So don't be shy, step forward. And that's going to take us straight away into the survey results. I believe I hand this over to Jen and Adam. Is that correct? Or did I mess that up?
I'm going to jump in since nobody else is right now. I'm fine with that.
Okay, cool. I'll help you then, since apparently
you control the slides, so fire away.
So this is the breakdown of IT shops that are centralized versus decentralized. Obviously, you can see we got a large set of data devoted to centralized IT, 84% to be exact. So there's that one. Feel free, steering committee, to step in if I miss a highlight or something that you guys want to talk about. Definitely happy to share. Current positions, there's the spread on where people fall in that role between individual contributors. 24%, I'm sorry, supervisor management, 32% in the department head / director role, and just a blip of executives and VPs level. So there's
and sorry, Ed, was stuffing my face and I had a mouthful of chicken nuggets when we were starting this.
I hope they're awesome. I hope they were delicious chicken nuggets.
They were cold, but yeah, I think just a bit of context in terms of what this survey is. In the past, the project management community group would send out a pretty lengthy survey, which I think many of us found very valuable. This year, Educause has introduced a new survey tool for us all to use. And so to get us started on kind of a longitudinal survey track, we did ask just a series of, I think, 10 or less questions. Took about 2 minutes or so. And so the reason we're polling this group is we want to be able to gather information that's both relevant to the group that's on the 1,600 folks who are on this, to kind of give us a better sense of who is part of this group and can see those posts that you post and who engage with us in these monthly meetings. But also having a bit of seasonality to when we release these surveys and get some hot topics in there that would be useful for this group. So as you're going through this, that's kind of the context of the survey. We want to send this out at some regular cadence so we can kind of track some of the metrics of who's part of this group, but also have anything that's hot topic related, as you know, when we all went remote and COVID was a big topic for quite some time. That would be a good opportunity for us to introduce some of those questions into that and track, and then share out with this group what we're finding when we poll. And I believe we had about 100 folks who responded to this, which is a pretty decent footprint. And so as we mature this process a little bit and have more regular cadence for surveys, and you all have some items or topics that you're interested in, we may do a survey call for topics, and we can kind of poll the group to see what would be beneficial for you all. So yeah, I guess that's my spiel on what this is and kind of why it's important. So Ed, if you want to keep rolling, that's great.
I would love to. And I do want to pause here to as a former college radio DJ, the lesson you learn is always capitalize on the funny stuff. So I'm definitely going to do that now. If Adam can come on to a recorded session and admit that he's eating chicken nuggets during a community group meeting, then any one of us can share our presentations and content. So definitely something to keep to inspire you with. All right.
Cold chicken nuggets at that end.
Yeah, cold chicken. I mean, I would have been okay with warm chicken nuggets, but the fact that he came on, yeah, he owned it completely. So, we'll take any topic. I'm going to stop right there before this gets worse. So this is a comparison, if I understand this correctly, this is the two charts showing the comparison of formal PMOs versus, we're talking about informal here? So yeah, or the acknowledgement that PMO. And the number of people in that PMO. So the chart showing here in Kansas State purple, that we've got a majority of people do acknowledge that they have a formal PO, and it looks like the majority of that set, the majority of those PMOs fall in right around the 1 to 4 range in terms of staff equivalents. All righty. Kirsten, I'm going to pause just to give people time to, look at that graph, digest it too. All right, so I am speeding through this pretty quickly. Here's a breakdown of the respondents that have their certifications. So almost split right down the middle, slightly over. Okay. And here's an awesome slide, most valuable features of Connect. So this was the showing that the monthly PMCG meetings are in the top 3, as well as the document library, the webinar recordings, and the document library in terms of the template section. So that's good to hear. We worked hard on preparing all 3 of those.
This is actually an updated slide, Ed. I don't know if you can refresh or not.
Yeah, there is a spreadsheet in there now.
Well, that's awesome. I don't think I can.
Huh.
Well, I'm going to move on and tell you what, we'll figure out a way to get that spreadsheet if we need to. And this is the word cloud from what people hope to gain from the project management community group. And I think the steering committee, we talked about this. Does anyone want to chime in on what they take from this information? Adam and/or anyone else?
Yeah, so part of what we were trying to do with this round of surveys was to get a better understanding of what the community group, the 1,600 folks that we have through Educause Connect, what you all find valuable from being a part of the community group. And I think a lot of what we saw, which are highlighted here, I mean, obviously project front and center, but the big things for us, ideas, resources, tools, those were big for us, because I know when I reach out to the community group for something, it's because I have some problem or something that I'm working on, and I kind of just want to throw it to the group for help, or somebody has experienced this before. So that's where ideas, learn, resource, tools, I think that's all highlighted within here. So I thought that was an important call out there, because personally, I use the group for tools, templates, and to leverage the expertise of you all when we're tackling something new. So that was just kind of what I took from this word cloud. I don't know, Birch, if you have anything else you'd want to mention.
No, that's exactly. And I think that even reminds me of when I first found the group years ago, was because we were working on a project that was fairly complicated, and someone said, hey, have you thrown that out to the Educause listserv to see what they've got for feedback?
Yep.
I didn't even know about the resource at that point. So that's how I got involved and realized that it was a really valuable resource to be able to ping those like minds and learn and leverage from other people's lessons learned. So this really seems to speak to that same sort of need and value out of the group.
I'm a little concerned that someone put my name here. Hopefully that's an abbreviation for the word education, but
No, it probably is your name.
oh, awesome. Well, I'm glad you're able to meet that need, because here I am. All right. So,
You remember that in the previous slide, they found it really valuable to go to the old recordings. They just like your voice. So.
oh, please stop. All right. So I'm going to take a risk here, because the fact that we don't have this table, I'm going to hit F5. Perfect. Oh, we saw it.
Saw it. Magic.
I see what it's doing. Okay, perfect. There we go. Is that the table
That's
that we were
the
looking
one.
for? Okay. There you go. I'll take a moment to let people digest that information. That's the average ratings, it looks like, for the different areas that people were saying were features of Connect. I have the transcription bar floating over the heading, so I'm having to read around that to get that heading.
Yes, and one note, as we look in if you wonder where those numbers came from, we used a Likert scale on the survey. So it was 0 if you've never heard of it, and then 1 to 5 from least to most useful or most value. So what we did was we filtered out the zeros, because if people hadn't heard of it, they don't really have an opinion, on that side of it. We can share those as part of the formal results. So we just took, for those who are aware of the different activities and features, and compiled it up. So if they gave it a 1, it had a 1 point. If they gave it a 5, it had a 5 point. So we picked up the average score coming out of that to get that impression of folks have.
Okay. So through there's the word cloud again. So now we move on to our keynote presented by both Jen Birch and Fred Baker, talking about our professional development certification. And so I hand the mic over to Jen and Fred.
Yeah, and I will open it up to say that this is, please do ask questions. Fred and I want to share our experiences and try to impart any information that might be helpful for others. But, we want this to be a conversation as well, because this is just what we've experienced, mine having been through the certification process for many years, Fred's from a more recent perspective and sort of transitioning different types of environments. But please ask questions. It's an open floor at this point. So Ed, do you want to go ahead and jump to the next slide here for us, please?
There you go.
I am a senior IT project manager with the University of Michigan, and I have been here now for just under 10 years, but I have been an IT project manager specifically for well over 20 years now. I kind of fell into IT. We were having a conversation about this earlier too, that, we don't necessarily align with what our educational background was. In a lot of ways in IT, we just kind of bubble up into that role because we have the traits and the skill sets to be able to support us as a project manager and being effective. But I have friends and colleagues that were studying drama and music and and they still managed to find their way into the technology world. So I have a similar background. I actually pursued my PMP certification about 8 years into project management, strictly because I was working on a program for Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and was managing a $40 million project or program budget, I should say, and just felt that in a field that was dominated by male peers, I really needed to have more credibility. I don't necessarily have gravitas, I admit it. So in a lot of ways, having the skill sets and the credentials to back up things, it became very useful for me. So the PMP was a natural fit. And I can tell you that out of all the tests I've taken so far, that will be the hardest one to pass. It is also, from what I've seen in my experience, the only one that seems to have any sort of benefit to getting a promotion in salary too. The others, you might be able to use it as a negotiation point, but there's sort of an inferred ranking, if you will, when you get your PMP. So if that's something that you're interested in, don't miss the opportunity to leverage that to ask for a salary change or to recognize that that is a big achievement and accomplishment in your background. For those of us that have it, we tend to just assume that it's an easy thing to do. I do have some colleagues that have not passed the test. And I would say that they are people that I truly do respect, and I know that they're great project managers. So it is a hard test to pass, but you can do it. I know quite a few people, and there's probably half of us in this room I know that have the PMP already today. So I did that first. And then I kind of shifted around different roles. And by working with various teams on sort of more of a product and service delivery piece, I recognized very quickly that Agile was the new thing. So even before the 2014, back in 2011, I was getting exposed to more of those direct experiences that indicated that Agile was going to be hitting the ground here pretty soon. And so as I started coming into organizations and adopting some of those processes, I realized that I needed to know more formally how to manage more agile projects. You kind of learn practices within organizations and teams, but there's a phrase that they call it scrum butt, because it's kind of scrum, but they do these other things too. It's so common, but it's because Scrum is the most known and well adopted and very flexible and easy to adapt. So a lot of teams have what they think is agile, but it's not really a true framework or methodology. It's kind of similar, but not really. I figured I needed to have the true training that would give me the basics. And then from there, I could try and help teams scale and adjust as needed wherever it made sense. But the CSM is pretty easy to pass. I'll just throw it out there. It's expensive because you have to do training sessions. So you have to do a couple of days of training, but you take the test at the end of the training and you're done. And I think most people are going to pass that test. It's not the hardest thing to get through. That said, it is pretty common and so many people can pass it that I don't think it carries as much weight and credibility as you might get if you were doing like a SAFe training. So SAFe is Scaled Agile Framework for enterprises. I'm sorry. That one's a really popular thing right now in private sector. I'm starting to see hints of it pop up in higher ed, but it is very enticing to organizations that don't want to let go of control, but want to allow their teams to do agile. Now, a SAFe certification, you're going to see salaries bump like crazy because it is a much more complicated and heavy thing to do. And there's layers of certification you can get there too. The CSM's through Scrum Alliance, as is the CSPO, which is your Certified Scrum Product Owner. I took that one again because I felt like it was valuable for me to have a basic understanding of the different roles involved in a Scrum project. And from there, I would be better apt to advise the teams I was working with. I've held the product management role in previous organizations. So I had an expectation going in, and I quickly realized that it's actually different than what the Scrum product owner would advise for. And there is this, you really do have more of that true ownership and responsibility over a product in the truest sense of a CSPO role. That is probably not the most common thing in organizations today. And I know we've talked about that even with groups with the ITSM group, where product owners, product managers, service managers, like there's kind of a variation in higher ed. But having that CSPO helped me have an understanding of what the expectation would be and try and help mentor and guide and work with other managers to help them understand, what would be an ideal scenario to be fitting that role for them. Does it have a salary increase? Nope. Do a lot of people pursue it? Not really. I just know that when I work as a project manager, my role is really much in advising and helping and coaching and guiding. And I find that I'm most successful in doing those things when I have a good understanding of the information to talk to. I more recently did the PMI ACP. Fred has as well, and he can tell you about his experience with that. It's not super hard, but I will tell you that if you do things like a PMP and then you do an ACP, you really do have to remember that they are different principles. And there will be questions on the test that could seem like they make sense for a PMP type of style, but don't make sense for ACP. There are some true, like those kind of gotcha questions that'll be thrown out there that it seems like it would be the right thing, but you have to remember front and center what agile principles are, and then be able to speak to that. And that'll help you kind of make sure that you're focused on the agile-esque version of the ACP work. But once you've got that, and just like the PMP, you actually have an opportunity to kind of hurry up and write down all your stuff on a piece of paper. Your best thing is going to be, and I think I mentioned this in a previous presentation, you're going to write that Agile manifesto out and keep that right in front of your face so that whenever you're in doubt, you're going to keep going back to that and say, oh yeah, Agile, this is the right answer for that question. But that one in particular seems to have a little bit of variability in whether or not it impacts your career. I think it has more credibility by far than a CSM, but it still hasn't quite grown in appreciation with management from what I've seen. Now, the people in the project management roles do appreciate it because it is one that takes into account what projects really are versus the product and service management piece. And I think if you're going to try and do any sort of agile training, that would be the one that I would say try and go there first. Scrum is only really valuable for organizations that are truly Scrum focused. And so there are a number of other Scrum-based training certifications out there, but Agile, the ACP seems to be the one that's a little bit more flexible, and it teaches you a breadth and diversity of Agile frameworks and methodologies. You won't get that in the very focused and specialized certifications. Not that anybody's really interested in what my plan is here, but I just threw it out there that as a project manager, I am always recognizing the need to stay on top of my education. I have to be. The teams that I work with are trying to do cutting edge technology, and it's, I think it's a disservice to my teams that I don't continue to grow and expand myself. So I try to keep a plan in place, and this comes in handy if you're going for a PMP. Keep track of your projects, keep track of any of the work that is project-like, and just have that plan in place and try and monitor your progress along the way. You can use that experience as project management experience as well. Even if it's not a formally charged or chartered project, managing a project is what the PMI is most interested in. So there are things that you can actually say, yeah, I managed a project. It wasn't a formal thing that had my sponsor from the organization, but I did these things that are core principles of a project management practice, and that counts. So if I had to give you any hints and tips for passing a PMP, keep track of those. They do matter, and it does make a difference when you're filling out information. Does anybody have any questions before I hand it over to Fred?
Jennifer, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I didn't check, I didn't look this up or confirm what someone told me, but someone had said that the PMP certification was going away. And I was like, I'm not sure about that. So, but you just speaking about that made me helped me to remember that conversation. Do you know anything about that? Is that true or just a silly rumor that someone was talking?
I think it's a silly rumor.
Thank
I could
goodness.
speculate like crazy that it probably has a lot to do with the fact that folks are still bought into the idea that agile is the thing.
Mhm.
Agile absolutely has its place. I'm a huge advocate for agile. I promote it like crazy. I'm a big champion, but not at the sake of certain scenarios where projects require a little bit more controls.
Right.
And some organizations just aren't capable of adopting that sort of risk embracing approach to project management.
Right. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
PMP is
Thank
not
you.
going away anytime soon. It is the most widely used and adopted and recognized practice out there. So it would
Right.
be a
That's
big
what I
thing.
thought. That's what I thought. Like, this person doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
But,
no.
you know, I wanted to do my fact checking before I confronted them. So thank you. Thank you.
But watch me eat my words in about another 5-6 years.
Oh, no.
Hey Jennifer, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I got PMP certified last year in 2021, and
Congratulations.
thank you. And that was I believe it was in January they started incorporating agile methodologies into the PMP certification. I actually took it 2 or 3 months after that, so sort of the restaurant plan because I wasn't focusing on that, and then I had to focus on it. But given that now the PMP certification has that agile concept in it, it's built in. How would that affect my decision, for example, to get a PMI ACP certification? If that's even relevant anymore, because it's already part of the PMP certification.
Yeah, I'll let Fred. Fred, do you want to chime in on that one since you've
Yeah,
taken
that's
it more
actually-
recently?
Yeah, thank you. That's actually some of what I was going to talk about. It's because they did change the PMP exam for 2021. And Isaac, you're right. It includes a lot more agile. And, you know, rather than having to go and do a brain dump of the 5-10-49 like Jen did and think about all the inputs and outputs and all that, it was a lot more scenario based and situational. It was a lot more agile. They said maybe 50%, but it felt like more than that. And so it's not a huge leap to go from the PMP as it is in 2021 to agile, but it's maybe more of a leap than you might think it is. Like I went from the PMP in 2021 and I just went and took the 21-hour training to sort of complete the requirements for the ACP. And I went into it and I sort of think agile more naturally, but going into the ACP, I did not score as well as I sort of thought I would. Some of that had to do with the fact that I thought there was a break in the test. There was no break in the test. So that leads to challenges, but the nature of the questions are a little deeper and a little different, asked a little differently than they are in the new PMP. And so you really have to sort of know where you're going. You have to know agile in a way that is a little different than the way you study for the PMP, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was getting at too, is that PMI does this with all of their cert tests, is they'll throw out more than one question that potentially could be the right answer, but there's always one that's better. And when I did the ACP, that was my thing, was there were almost always two that were like, wow, this really makes sense for both. But you know what? If I go back to the Agile Manifesto, this one is truly more of an agile thing than a just standard good practice as a project manager. And I wish I could give you a scenario off the top of my head, but just know that there are a lot of those kind of like pitfalls and gotchas where it comes down to sort of those, you know, communication over documentation. Like it's the which thing is most important to Agile, and it makes a difference. And not to brag, but I actually did score really high on my ACP. But I think because it's a mind shift, it's definitely a way of thinking, and it's tricky, even because in most cases in real world, like we work in higher ed, there's so much bureaucracy, it's ridiculous. So the idea of being able to, like, bypass documentation, it's not a reality, right? So to be able to remember that that might not be my reality, but that's what the test is looking for going through that. I couldn't tell you, Isaac, though, if it's worth it, other than I think, from what I'm hearing, the PMP seems to have a lot more appreciation for Agileware. I know that the new PMBOK, I've read that, and it does seem to at least acknowledge some of the common core principles, but it's never a bad thing either. I think if you want to continue to have the credentials and the backing and have that sort of experience, just the studying for it alone is going to help you really delve into the variety of Agile-based frameworks out there, because there are quite a few. And some teams are better suited to one approach than others. Like I have infrastructure teams that are truly better for Kanban than they are something like a Scrum. The ACP is going to get into a little bit more detail on those different types of ways of doing things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I did hog up quite a bit more than I thought I would for my 5 minutes, so I'm going to let Fred go ahead and jump in here. And if anybody has any questions, please, again, go ahead and reach out. I'll keep an eye on the chat.
Yeah, thank you. And Ed, I animated my slides, so Ed's gonna keep up with me here, and I appreciate that. My background is not in project management. I've never formally been a project manager or worked in a PMO, although I've done a lot of informal projects, sort of like what Jen was referring to, individually and at the institution level. I've been able to be the functional lead for a large scale enterprise implementation project, and for transitioning a lot of L&D projects, so transitioning LMSs and transitioning faculty into hybrid teaching spaces and those kind of things. So my goal, though, was to be a teacher, and I wanted to teach college. And so to do that, you have to have a doctorate, and I got a doctorate in instructional design. I began that in 2010, and I graduated in 2014. And if you'll, there you go. So I graduated in 2014, and I got my first position at a university, which was not a faculty job. And that's where I spent a lot of time just engaging, bringing at the university I was at, there was no online and hybrid instruction. So we created a process to train faculty in that space and do course reviews and all of that. And a number of other things, creating open badges and these sort of strategic initiatives that get launched in the academic spaces in higher ed, or on centers for teaching and learning and ed tech departments and those kind of things. And we were IT adjacent at that time, but I've never been in IT, although I've sort of worked very closely with them. So in 2016, because of that work, I was asked to recover really this enterprise level data analytics implementation. It was the EAB Student Success Collaborative, and they had been implementing it for 1.5 years. And they really just needed somebody to come in and get down and dirty with the technology, but also be able to sort of step back and roadmap. There were all kinds of people with administrative access, and there was confusion over whether ITS was involved, and some things like that. Road mapping the process, dealing with the vendor, all of those pieces sort of needed a home. And so that's really where I cut my teeth on project management, because I was responsible for this thing that was sort of out of control at the time. And what little bit I knew about project management coming through instructional design, because it's a very project oriented space, I ended up with a 4x8 whiteboard on my wall trying to figure out how you approach all the things that PMI sort of lays out in the framework, and things that you've polished over the years in your experience in project management. from identifying and managing stakeholders and, identifying resources, creating roadmaps, I didn't deal with budgets very much, but I did have to produce results and, handle change requests, handle complaints about challenges with the system and all of that. So I kind of learned that the hard way, which makes me appreciate so much more when it's formalized and you can think about things like a logic map, right? Or, resource planning, those kind of things are just huge. So in 2018, I got the opportunity to actually teach. And so I stopped with this project and I moved into faculty life. And as a faculty member, the types of courses, the types of projects I was dealing with were creating courses and helping students think through research projects and those kind of things, which you might not think of in terms of project management, but they're sort of small informal things that require the same type of effort. So in 2020, my contract was sort of limited term. My contract ended. May 2020 was sort of peak COVID shutdown. Nobody knew what was going on. Nobody was hiring anybody. And everything was frozen. And my wife and I have 4 sons and they all, they depend on our income. So I said, what am I going to do? And very thankfully, I was able to move into the freelance space. And so doing freelance work, I started doing instructional design, course development, that kind of thing. And that, as I did that, I realized that wasn't teaching. It's not really what I wanted to do, but it was something I was good at. But the pieces that I appreciated about it wasn't developing the courses or all of that. It was the road mapping, it was the planning, it was the going back and forth about the different elements. If I outsourced something, it was making sure that I sort of monitored that. It's that more macro level piece, and that ties to project management. So moving into that space really allowed me to think more deeply about how I could leverage my experience as a project manager. And that led to the decision to really pursue the PMP. So in 2021, I basically spent a lot of that year preparing, coming from an informal background in project management, but having done stuff and essentially having done stuff without knowing it was what it was called, right? I'm having to go back and sort of backtrack and say, oh, well, this ties to that piece, or this ties to that piece, or this is what I was trying to do at that point, right? And so I ended up doing a boot camp, like a PMP prep boot camp. And I had access to mock exam questions as an authorized training provider, sort of official questions, and those were useful. But I didn't feel like I was there yet. And so I signed up for the Udemy course on the PMP prep. And I studied through that course and ended up taking the PMP in December of 2021 and passed it. And I passed it with high marks. I was very thankful for that. And it was a good experience overall. The test itself was challenging just for technical issues, but not for the questions. To me, I felt very well prepared from the mock exam, and I felt like the questions themselves were situational, but if you sort of understood where you were at in terms of the 5 process groups and the 10 knowledge areas and sort of had that awareness, it was easy enough to, and having practiced with the mock exams, it was easy enough to sort of say, this question is asking for this type of thing. And a lot of them were like, what does the project manager do first or next or last, or what should they have done to prevent this? Those kind of situational questions. So it was something that was very comfortable, especially given all that study. So I planned immediately after I completed the PMP, and it was sort of a long journey that year, but I said, well, what else could I do? And I actually studied for the ACP. And so I just signed up for another Udemy class that fulfilled the 21-hour requirement. And I skimmed the ACP book. And I felt comfortable based on what I had looked at in the PMP and the ACP. And we kind of hinted at this a few minutes ago, but I didn't score quite as well as I wanted to. I passed, I passed with, better scores than I might have hoped in some areas. But there were a couple of areas where it was like, well, I should have prepared a little bit more deeply. And I think a lot of that was just because I think I was expecting the ACP questions to sort of be in the same feel as the PMP questions and to sort of focus on the same types of elements. And I think the ACP, because the PMP was just redone in 2021, the ACP was written longer ago. And so I think it still has that older PMI essence about it, because when Jen did the PMP, I'm sure she'll tell you that she had to brain dump the process groups and all of that stuff. And so it's the ACP is not to that level, but you certainly need to understand the Agile Manifesto and the different styles of Agile and Scrum and Kanban and all of that, and sort of understand the differences there. So that brings us to now, which is 2022. I finished the ACP. I also got the ATP instructor certification, so that allows me to teach PMP exam prep for authorized training providers. I've sat through a couple of courses and trained, but I've not actually conducted a course yet. And then on to 2023, my plan and my goal right now is I'm in a job search, and I'm transitioning from that background into something more formal. And I'm going to find something remote and nonprofit, which has challenges in itself. But other options are to sort of pursue different avenues. And this process has really forced me to sort of splinter project management into different areas as best as I can, so that I can understand the niche, because you fit well in different niches. And so given my background in instructional design and learning and development, and my consulting work in learning and development firms, I get further with interviews and applications and those kind of things in L&D project management spaces. And that niche is relatively small, because there are a lot of people who come from sort of instructional design background and start doing project management in that space, but don't sort of pursue the formal project management knowledge. And so I have a bit of an advantage in that space, but I've never worked in a formal PMO, right? So if I apply for those types of jobs, I'm not as well qualified in those spaces. So just sort of realizing your strengths and realizing where you want to go. But that's really what I wanted to share, was that journey, and to just sort of talk a little bit about those exams from a practical sort of newer exam state. So I do want to open it up if anybody has any questions about any of that, or any insights that you want to share. If you're sort of in an atypical project management path, all of that would be great to talk about.
Going to Mike in here. Yeah, encourage, if there's no questions, are there questions? Not, we can.
May have lost everybody. The gist to get out of that is that the PMP has changed a lot, and it's very agile focused, and you can still get there from an informal project management or an atypical background. And I think that there's space for people who have that type of informal background, even if it's in a niche. Those are
Fred, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
I got my PMP 5 or so years ago, and I guess what I've been hearing is that the PMBOK used to be, this is what you read and studied, and when you got your piece of paper and sat down to the exam, you just sat there and did a brain dump on everything that you had there. What I've heard from a couple exam prep companies is that there's a bit of a move away from the PMBOK as being the thing that you study. What's been your experience there?
Yeah, so you still very much study the PMBOK, but I think the way that you study it is different, if that makes sense. You're not, whereas you probably had to study so that you just memorized all the ITOs, the inputs, technology tools, outputs, and you memorized what processes they were in. I wasn't studying in fear of having to sort of like recall at random the specific ITOs and not forget any of them, or it was more about the flow. It was about the way that a project moves through the project management, the PMI process. And you still have the 5, 10, 49 and the processes and all of that, but it's more about, I'm saying it's more about, it probably had a lot to do with this at that point too, but to me, the way I studied was more, how does this flow? And what happens if it gets jammed up somewhere? Because it's so situational, the questions are really like along the lines of you're in this spot, or maybe you have to figure out that you're in this spot in the process. and something's happened, whether that's a sudden need for a change request, or they've cut your timeline short, or all these different situations that seem to happen in projects, and then just tying back to the PMI process, to the PMBOK, and the flow, and sort of mapping that. But the way, and I'm sort of speaking off of rusty memories here, but this shift in philosophy between PMBOK 6th and PMBOK 7th is along the lines of getting away from, it's becoming more of a focus on process and less of a focus on framework, I think is probably the right way to put that. And so they're more concerned with phases and guides and that kind of thing in PMBOK 7th. But PMBOK 6 is still very much alive, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Tammy, I see your question down below, and I just had a comment based on that, just because I have a bit of experience with managing a team where most of the team went for their PMP. One member went for their CAPM just because they said, I'm not really ready for the PMP, and they just this anecdotal experience is they kind of regretted not getting their PMP. They studied largely the same items that we studied. The tests seemed approximately the same.
It's typically the entry criteria that's a little different. So
yeah, I agree. If you meet the entry criteria, my personal experience is you may as well go for the PMP. Our experiences taking the exam and getting the CAPM versus the PMP were very similar. And I can't say that I have ever looked at a resume and said, well, you have your CAPM and not your PMP, so you're out. But I just feel like that's a bit more industry standard for the PMP. So if you meet those minimum qualifications, I would recommend going for the PMP, just in the experience that I've had.
yeah, Tammy, that was going to be my comment too. Is I have met people who didn't necessarily have the hours for a PMP, so that minimum criteria, and they did their CAPM, felt confident with it. The good news is the PMI is really great about allowing you to leverage PDUs across multiple certifications. So if by some chance you caught up on those requirements during that year, you could do the PDUs and repurpose that for your PMP as well, and not have quite a gap in between there. The same is true for like the PMP and the PMI ACP. When I do all of my training and education, some of those PDUs I can apply to both certifications.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a helpful thing, because otherwise you've got a lot of education to do.
It is. And actually, having just finished the PMP, and I was looking at all those PDUs, and doing that 21-hour training, dropped 21 PDUs into my PMP, the 21-hour Agile, the ACP training. So
yeah, and so Tammy, to try to actually answer your question, thanks, John, for calling that out. If you're looking for something to dip your toe in, kind of like a PMP light, the CAPM, at least from the experience that we had in my previous job, is very similar to the PMP. I wouldn't call it a PMP light. It's very similar. And so if you're going that route, I mean, just my experience, I'd recommend just getting the PMP if that's an option to you. It's very similar. You're going to be studying the same materials, the same type of practice tests, things like that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Isaac has a question in the chat also about the ACP, and one of the requirements being 8 months of Agile project management experience. And what if you don't have formal project example experience? So I didn't have formal Agile project management experience. That really most often comes in, I mean, even a lot of project managers don't have a lot of formal Agile project management experience, given that it's still sort of emerging, and unless you have a software development background, a lot of organizations don't do it. So PMI is really good about accepting hybrid examples, and about accepting Agile style projects that are informal. So like a lot of the course development projects that we've done, I wrote those up, and they accepted that as Agile experience, even though it wasn't like I'm a Scrum Master at a in an Agile space, if that makes sense. So.
And if you're during your day job, I know this is easy to say, like volunteer for things, but if during the day job you still don't have the opportunity to practice any agile projects, try and find volunteer things or something in your hobby time that you can apply those principles and practices to, and that will still count. They're fairly accommodating as long as you can prove that you did truly try to apply those frameworks and principles on that. I know I am a volunteer with my students or with my children's school parent council, and I do a lot of their tech support. And I very easily could apply some of the things that I'm doing as part of that work as hours that I've spent working on an agile project, right? So I don't, because I have projects that I work on a daily basis, but I could use those if I wanted to.
Yeah. And the other piece to add to that is just like Jen said, you can find volunteer opportunities, or you can sort of think about things that you've done. But when you're writing it up, just be very clear to tie your role and how it sort of met the agile criteria, what sort of agile elements you are focused on when you're writing that up, especially if it's informal, because you can't just point to it and say, well, that was an agile process, right? You sort of have to justify why that is. So when you're writing that up in your application, if you're clear about those things, I mean, they accepted mine, and I've seen them accept other people's. So I think you can get through with some informal experience. So, do you want to switch to the next slide since we're talking about certifications? And I see there's a comment in the chat, PGMP. So Jen, what were you gonna say?
Well, and the one of the questions here was asking about the program management professional one. You know, it's interesting is I have met 2 people who have that certification. And I don't know that that is anything that they needed to have. They just chose to have it. I don't see it coming up on a whole lot of job descriptions either. So that could just be awareness of it, or maybe it really isn't giving you all that much more than what you get as a project management professional. I mean, the portfolio management one seems like it's probably going to be a little bit more valuable for specific roles, but arguably program management, I don't know.
One thing
You're just managing a lot of little projects.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
Oh yeah, sorry. So one thing I've noticed is that the PMP has a lot of recognition even outside of project management spaces. But I wonder if because it has so much, like everybody knows what the PMP is, and you see PGMP or PFMP, you wonder what that is. And I wonder if having a PGMP or a PFMP almost loses that recognition on some level of the PMP, at least to outside circles.
Yeah, it's interesting. The 2 people that I know that have it are in federal government managing programs. I managed programs in that same space as well. And I would say that arguably my project management experience was good enough too. Like it feels like the distinction between the 2 is pretty nuanced. And the only real big difference is trying to take it up to like sort of that big picture vision and trying to keep all those pieces aligned versus managing a bunch of little independent projects, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I'd love to talk to somebody else if they know of or are planning to do it, because I originally thought about it and I thought, nah, I don't really see a whole lot of value for it. Ed, what did you say? You're skipping right over to the PFMP?
Yeah, I am. I echo what you're saying. I find, down here in the Houston area, across the street from Johnson Space Center, you'll see, I see some people with the program management certification, because if you've taken your PMB classes, they always give you that example about how the shuttle is a part of the program of the space portfolio, and inside the shuttle there's all these projects you got to do. All right. And I'm finding, though, that as you go up the chain, if you can call it going up, that it becomes increasingly challenging to study for, especially the portfolio management profession, because there are no formal courses. So I'm reading the PMBOK now. one blessing is to give you an idea, the PMBOK, or at least I have the 5th edition here. I think I've got the other versions back at the office, but they're all about the same size. They come in about 600 pages, the PMBOK does. The portfolio management body of knowledge is about 200 pages. But even so, you know, they're not riveting novels to read. You're reading essentially an expanded outline and concepts that, again, you've got to memorize and put in relationship inside your head. And then there's a practice exam book that working through, and I find that just going back and forth, like, okay, I'm taking the first practice exam, still need to bone up on these concepts, go back and learn that. And then the application process is, I'm going to call it a little rigorous. You've got one essay to talk about your portfolio, and you've got, I think it's 5 essay questions. I had it here in my paper tray. I think it is 5 essay questions that you've got to talk a bit about these different concepts, and you're essentially writing essays to show that, yes, I have read this body of knowledge and I know what I'm talking about, and here's how I've applied it. And so that's been an ongoing process. And you got 90 days to, once you start that in the PMI website, you got 90 days to button all that up and get that the way you need it to be so you can submit it on. So just some points if you're thinking of those other PMI certifications.
Yeah, I put this other slide in here because I think every now and then you'll cross paths with someone who says, oh, but what about Prince 2? Yeah, what about it? No, so the PMP is still by and far the most common and appreciated globally of the project management certifications. But when you're talking about people in like the UK, Prince 2 is actually, there are a lot of people with it. There's some people who even have both. It just kind of depends on what field you're in too. And I still haven't crossed paths with anybody on a Prince 2 that's in higher ed. It might just be that I haven't dealt with enough people in the UK or in Europe, but.
You know, say I personally, I studied for the Prince 2 and I have the book right in front of me here. There's some overlaps and some interesting concepts that I think you can take, but personally, I didn't pursue that further. I think for some of the things that you just talked about, Birch, it just didn't really align with how higher ed was structured in a lot of cases, but there are some interesting concepts that you can take from that and sprinkle into your job duties. I didn't sit for the exam though.
Yeah.
And I found out just last week that there's another one. I thought I'd seen all these certifications. They're redoing some of the job descriptions on our campus, and they've plopped one on some of my staff's. A certification required is the IAPM, and did some brief digging in it. So I want to fully admit here that I web surfed it for about 20 minutes.
Is that IAPM or IPMA?
I want to say it was IAPM.
I know there's like IPMA, and there's like levels A through D or something like that.
Okay. And this one was interesting as far as I could tell. It's certification. It looks like it's an online test. And then what was interesting, the key thing that stuck out to me is it doesn't require, because if you Google whatever it is, IAPM versus PMP, the IAPM doesn't require the continuing PDUs. And to me, that's a turnoff, because to Jen's point, as she said earlier, we all need to be investing in ourselves professionally. And I not necessarily on board with, you got the certification so you can put it on the wall. There it is. You need to continue to invest in yourself to maintain that certification.
I have seen that one now before. And actually, I think I have a colleague who has that.
Yeah, not discounting it. It just caught me off guard. Like, oh,
yeah, no, he laughed because he said it was so easy to pass that he was wondering if it was even worth his time.
So he left in the middle of the test?
Yeah, he was like, oh, geez, really? so like, he took the test and he got the cert, obviously, but he was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, we're at time. Ed, do you want to
wrap us up? I do want to wrap us up. Thanks for that cue. I was in the middle of eating a cold chicken nugget, and I have to agree with Adam. These are pretty good. So moving on. Next meeting, again, remember, we're off July, so our next meeting is August 17th. Hope to see you guys there, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And there's 2 links there, some additional Educause resources. There's the Connect platform address, connect.educause.edu. Always a good place to go when you've got spare time, and you can poke around there, look at the library discussions, contribute to the questions. And there's been quite a few questions that have been popped up from our members about getting advice for this and that. So, step in there, help contribute. Let's make that community a great place. And then there's the PMCG Wiki website, which is really transitioning to PMCG Connect. In fact, we've moved a majority of the web pages there. Last count, I think I've only got 5 pages there, and may even have visions of farming those pages to Connect somehow as soon as I find a good way to do that. So Connect's the place to go is the bottom line there. So I want to give thanks to both Jen and Fred for their presentation. That was awesome to hear. And thanks for those that have participated, and thanks to everyone else who listened in. I hope you guys, it's the middle of the week, so I'm going to say I hope the rest of your week is awesome and that you have a great weekend, and see you in August. Y'all take care, as they say in Texas.